Jerry Seinfeld stood on stage in 2024 telling jokes to thousands of fans. But something was different. His own children don't laugh at his humor anymore. They ask him, "Is that a bit?" whenever he tries to connect. And in 2014, he revealed something shocking on national TV when he told Brian Williams he might be on the autism spectrum, saying his brain works differently. And now at 71, the signs are getting clearer as his obsession with routine has gotten extreme, and the distance from his family is growing. And what's happening to comedy's biggest star will surprise you, because Jerry Seinfeld was born on April 29, 1954, in Brooklyn, New York, to Kalman and Betty Seinfeld, both carrying generations of heritage shaped by war, exile, and tradition. His father, Kalman, fled Hungary after World War II and worked as a sign painter with a mind for jokes he collected like souvenirs during the war and brought home to dinner, where he performed old army gags, while Betty came from a Syrian Jewish background, with parents from Aleppo registered as Turkish when they arrived in 1917, and that blend of post-war grit and ancient Middle Eastern storytelling created the unseen stage Jerry was born into. And he grew up in Massapequa, Long Island, with his older sister, Caroline, in a house where humor was survival, and his great-grandmother's rabbinic line traced back to King David, adding a mythic thread to his otherwise suburban life. And his father's shop, Cal Signs, was a quiet playground where Jerry sketched and joked, creating a handwritten sign that said Springwater, not kidding, which became a local hit. And laughter from strangers lodged into his mind early, because it wasn't about applause, but about noticing something small and saying it just right. And inside the family, there was a running joke about Cal Signs being referenced years later in the Fusilli Jerry episode, like a hidden fingerprint from his father's past. And Massapequa gave Jerry everything he needed: dry humor, rivalry with Caroline, and the ability to notice tiny things everyone else ignored. And from age 8, Jerry obsessed over comedy while other kids obsessed over baseball, as he stayed up watching The Tonight Show, mimicking Buddy Hackett and filling handwritten joke files he rehearsed in the mirror. And by 10, he told people he wanted to be a comic, not as a fantasy, but as a focused study of timing and words. In high school, sharpened it further when he joined drama club, but improvised jokes into serious scenes frustrating teachers, but delighting students. And during a play, he added a line about cafeteria food that got a spontaneous laugh, which he never forgot. And at 16, he spent a summer on Kibbutz Sa'ar in Israel, where the clashing cultures fascinated him and later fed his material about airports, restaurants, and holidays. And family vacations reinforced Jewish heritage, but also made him feel overshadowed by Caroline, so he called himself the Invisible Son, humor becoming his shield for jealousy and disappointment, a defense mechanism that later became his signature style. And in 1972, he enrolled at SUNY Oswego, but felt isolated and transferred to Queens College in 1974, where open mics shaped him more than classes. And his first set in 1975 bombed, but Jay Leno encouraged him. So he kept filling legal pads with jokes about socks, refrigerators, and knocking without waiting, slowly developing precision timing. And by graduation in 1976, he tried a temp job for a week before quitting to pursue stand-up full-time, sleeping on couches, earning $50 gigs, and delivering quiet observational jokes at Catch a Rising Star until club owners noticed his precision in 1977, which led Rodney Dangerfield to put him on an HBO special that changed everything. And in 1980, he auditioned for a sitcom, but was told he looked too ethnic, which pushed him deeper into stand-up at the Improv. And in 1981, after killing on Evening at the Improv, he appeared on Johnny Carson, where America finally leaned in. And by 1982, he was a national name, though still broke enough to pawn his watch to pay rent, which nearly broke him but proved he wouldn't quit. And in 1987, his HBO special Stand-Up Confidential created major buzz and led to meeting Larry David, where they bonded over tiny observations, like extra shirt buttons and awkward run-ins with exes. And that conversation became their pitch for a sitcom about nothing, which NBC didn't understand but Rick Ludwin believed in enough to siphon money from a Bob Hope special to fund for more episodes. And on July 5, 1989, the Seinfeld Chronicles aired and bombed until it was renamed Seinfeld in 1990, and Jerry began pulling stories from real life like The Soup, Nazi based on a real owner who later threw him out in anger. But the episode became legendary. And by 1991, Jerry fought for more creative control and won rewriting scripts up to filming, which made the show unpredictable and authentic. And Elaine was added when Julia Louis-Dreyfus improvised a line about airline bathrooms at her audition and instantly fit the rhythm. And in 1992, the contest aired based on Larry David's real bet about who could go longest without touching themselves, using euphemisms that entered pop culture, drawing over 18 million viewers and later being voted TV Guide's greatest episode. And authenticity continued in details like filming outside Tom's restaurant while recreating the inside in LA. And in 1993, a writer's strike forced improvisation that made the show even more alive. And in 1994, the marine biologist episode came together hours before filming with Jason Alexander memorizing his monologue in 30 minutes. And by 1998, Seinfeld earned Jerry $1 million per episode, making him TV's highest-paid actor, while syndication and back-end deals brought him $267 million that year alone. And the finale drew 76.3 million viewers, though critics hated it, but the show had already changed television. And after it ended, Jerry went back on tour, earning $100 million between 1998 and 2000. And in 1999, he settled a joke theft accusation from Bill Kurzenbauer, which led him to catalog 840,000 jokes in legal pads. And the 2002 documentary comedian showed his vulnerability rebuilding a set from scratch. And in 2007, he voiced the animated B-movie, which earned $287 million. And in 2015, he filmed Comedians in Cars, getting coffee at the White House with Barack Obama, which drew over 52 million views, showing an unexpectedly casual side of political and comedic worlds mixing. And in 2017, he released Jerry before Seinfeld returning to the comic strip stage, surrounded by 4-decade-old legal pads of jokes, proving timelessness. And in 2019, he surprised Broadway crowds in The Betrothed, breaking script rules and riffing off audience stories, which extended the show's run. And during the 2020 pandemic, he released 23 Hours to Kill virtually from the Beacon Theater, earning $20 million, proving stand-up could survive without a room. And in 2024, he released Unfrosted on Netflix, fictionalizing the invention of Pop-Tarts into a ridiculous corporate war that drew 50 million views in 7 days, showing his mastery of absurd storytelling. But not everything in his life was funny, because in 1993, he met 17-year-old Shoshana Lonstein at age 39, and they began dating, which raised eyebrows. Then and now, though it lasted for years before ending. And in 1998, he met Jessica Sclair, who had returned from her honeymoon. And within 4 months, her husband filed for divorce, accusing her of betrayal before she became Jerry's fiancée. By the end of 1999, and later mother of his 3 children, though the messy beginning still follows them. And in 2014, Jerry said he might be on the autism spectrum without diagnosis, describing himself as literal and confused by small talk, which sparked debate, but made sense to fans who saw obsessive routines and precision as part of his nature. And in 2017, he refused to hug Kesha on the red carpet, which went viral as he explained he simply doesn't hug strangers, fitting the image of someone who controls chaos rather than participates in it. And since 2001, his Seinfeld Foundation has donated millions to autism research, including a $5 million anonymous donation in 2020, whether out of sincerity or image repair, but still meaningful. And today his legacy is valued at around $950 million and possibly over $1 billion, with Seinfeld reruns earning billions in syndication, including Netflix's $500 million streaming deal, while he continues earning from stand-up and Comedians in Cars, making his fortune built not on reinvention, but on repetition, precision, and the tiny details no one else notices. the leak didn't just expose a hidden donation. It opened a doorway into a world Tom Silva had spent 2 decades quietly building, one that linked 3 families, 2 coasts, and disasters the public thought were unrelated. And for the first time, investigators realized something. Tom hadn't just been reacting to tragedy. He'd been predicting it. When the 2025 whistleblower stepped forward, an accountant who had worked under strict NDA, the first question was simple. Why would America's most trusted home builder hide a secret foundation? But the second question was darker. How did he know exactly where disasters were going to happen before they happened? To understand that, you have to go back to 1999, that year. I was already a rising star on this old house. But off camera, something happened that never made the news. A massive, unreported gas leak occurred near a small Massachusetts neighborhood. The fire department responded quickly. Nobody died officially. But one house on the street belonged to a woman named Eleanor Briggs, an engineer who specialized in structural stress patterns caused by extreme temperature changes. She and Tom had never met before, yet after the near explosion, their paths crossed in a way neither expected. Eleanor believed the leak wasn't an accident. She had been warning local officials for months that aging pipes in the area were at risk due to what she called environmental pressure cycles, sudden, violent shifts in underground temperatures linked to long-term climate fluctuations. Her warnings were ignored, just as they had been in California years earlier, before several wildfire outbreaks. Tom listened. Really listened. And for the first time, he felt something he didn't feel on TV. Responsibility. He spent the next several months learning from Eleanor late-night calls, notes, diagrams, and field visits. She taught him how environmental stress could silently break a home long before a homeowner noticed. He taught her how buildings behave differently in the real world than they did in simulations. And then, in early 2000, she died in a single-car accident that never made sense to Tom. That's when her family, one of the 3 families sworn to silence, approached him. They handed him her final research file. Inside, it was something astonishing. A list of projected danger zones across the country. Areas where wildfire risk, structural collapse, probability, and gas pressure anomalies were rising fast. Many of these predictions didn't become real disasters until years later. That file became the foundation, literally, of Tom's secret project. He called it the Briggs Resilience Initiative, named after Eleanor. But publicly, the foundation had no name. No website, no announcements, no charity galas, just one goal. Strengthen at-risk communities before they became victims. And he funded it entirely with his own money. But this is where the California part of the story begins. Between 2021 and 2010, Tom quietly sent teams, usually retired builders, volunteer firefighters, and former engineers to small towns throughout Northern California. They've replaced old roof structures with fire-resistant materials. They reinforced foundations in neighborhoods where the soil was shifting dangerously. And they installed pressure regulators on properties built over aging gas lines. The locals never knew who was behind it. They were told it was part of a pilot safety program. The unmarked trucks never carried logos. The workers never mentioned Tom's name in 2017. When California suffered one of its worst wildfire seasons in history, journalists noticed something strange. 3 towns that had been expected to burn survived with minimal damage. Statistically impossible. Fire historians called it a miracle. But the truth was simpler. Tom's teams had rebuilt them long before the flames appeared. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, Massachusetts was facing its own environmental challenges: flooding, infrastructure decay, and cold weather structural stress. And that's where the second family entered the picture. The Morettis were a multi-generational family of masons from Boston's North End. They had survived everything: the blizzard of '78, the Big Dig collapses, and dozens of storms that battered the coast. Tom had worked with them for decades. Behind closed doors, he approached them with a proposal: join his network and train younger builders in emergency fortification techniques. What Tom was building secretly was an army, not of soldiers, but of tradespeople. People who could reinforce a school roof in a weekend. People who could inspect a gas line and fix it before it exploded. People who understood structures the way a doctor understands a body. The Morettis agreed. And by 2015, they were training dozens of young builders every year, all sworn to confidentiality. They were taught to see danger where others saw nothing. A warped beam, a stressed joint. A crack forming in winter that could become a collapse in spring by then. The initiative had already quietly prevented 27 potential disasters, none of which the public ever heard about. But there was one more piece. The third family. And their story was the most shocking of all. The Alvarez family lived near Paradise, California, the town devastated by the 2018 firestorm. Before the fire, they had been helping Tom's initiative fortify dozens of homes in the region. But when the fire hit, they made a decision that went far beyond construction work. Instead of evacuating immediately, they stayed behind to protect a cluster of reinforced houses that were sheltering elderly residents who couldn't escape in time. The family held the fire back for almost 2 hours using equipment Tom had secretly supplied to them: hitch-resistant shields, fire blankets, and emergency water bladders. 22 people survived because of them. Tom wanted to publicly honor the family, but they refused, partly out of fear, partly out of loyalty. If their involvement became public, it would expose the entire initiative, and so they stayed silent. Tom did too. But here's where everything changed. In 2025, federal investigators began looking into unusual construction activity that didn't match any registered company. They found training camps in Massachusetts, secretly reinforced houses in California, anonymous donations to fire departments, unexplained equipment purchases. On paper, it looked like a covert organization operating across 2 states. When the whistleblower leaked the financial records to the press, the country believed they had uncovered a massive scandal. But the truth, once revealed, stunned everyone. Tom Silva had used his fame, his fortune, and his skills to build the largest underground disaster prevention network in the United States. No politics. No publicity. No credit, just prevention. A reporter asked him, "Why didn't you ever tell anyone?" Tom smiled softly. "Because real heroes fix things before they break." And with that single sentence, the country finally understood what he had been doing for 26 years, quietly saving lives long before the cameras ever rolled. The public reaction was unlike anything Tom had ever experienced. For decades, he had been America's gentle, soft-spoken carpenter, the man who taught families how to fix squeaky floors, repair kitchens, and rebuild old homes. But overnight, the world saw him differently. He wasn't just a builder. He wasn't just a TV host. He was the architect of a hidden safety net stretching across 2 coasts. Yet even after the leak, even after the interviews, even after the news channels ran headline after headline, the silent carpenter who saved America, Tom still refused to reveal everything. There were parts of the story that he believed were too sensitive, too connected, too dangerous for the public to know. And those parts had to do with the numbers, you see. Eleanor Briggs hadn't just predicted disasters. She had calculated patterns. Those patterns, once dismissed, had now proven eerily accurate. She and Tom had refined them together before her death, and those predictions became the initiative's roadmap: flood zones, fire corridors, gas line pressure risk, structural failure clusters. But there was one cluster they had never discussed publicly: the Northeast Instability Grid, a network of nearly invisible stress points running under parts of Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Maine, not caused by earthquakes. Not caused by climate change alone. Tom had kept that part hidden. Until now, in late 2025, when he finally agreed to sit down with an independent safety investigator, not a journalist, he brought a single, battered leather folder. Inside were 26 years of data that no one outside the initiative had seen. The investigator, a former FEMA analyst named Claudia Morales, described the moment she opened the folder as the most unsettling of my career. In it were warning logs that predicted A. Gas line rupture in Lowell 2 years before it happened, a series of microfires near Chicopee 5 years before the fire department documented them, a structural collapse zone in Portland, Maine, 11 years. 4 engineers raised alarms. But the most disturbing prediction of all was labeled simply the Trinity event. 3 red circles. 3 weak points. 3 states. If all 3 were hit by the right combination of environmental stress within the same season, it could trigger a cascading infrastructure failure that would impact millions, and the date on the file. Estimated window, 2025 to 23 to. Claudia looked at Tom, stunned. Why didn't you tell anyone? She asked. Tom leaned back, hands folded. Eyes tired. Because people don't listen until after the damage is done, he replied. And because once you tell them, it becomes politics, not safety. The Briggs Initiative, he explained, was never about fear. It was about prevention. Quiet, efficient, invisible prevention. Once the government got involved, secrecy would be impossible, and so would effective intervention. But the investigator wasn't satisfied. Tom, this isn't fixing roofs anymore. This is national-level risk. If these predictions are right, he interrupted her gently. They are right. That night, the investigator filed a confidential report. By morning, Washington knew. By evening, 5 governors were briefed. And within 3 days, Tom found himself sitting in a windowless conference room in Boston, facing a half-circle of state officials, federal representatives, and structural experts. This was no longer a story. This was an emergency, but Tom was ready. He opened a digital map, newer version of Eleanor's original model, and for the first time, the government saw the full picture. Not just the danger zones, but the silent victories of the initiative to 147 neighborhoods. Stabilized. 92 schools reinforced. 36. Fire corridors widened. 11 predicted collapses. Prevented for hidden evacuations. Conducted. But the officials had one question. Why did you hide this from us? Tom didn't answer immediately. He tapped the screen, zooming into a region north of Springfield, highlighting dozens of tiny, scattered dots. Homes, bridges, old utility lines, all quietly repaired by his teams over the years.